Okay, Compass's Prelude to Rebellion. So, geez, it always looks like it's high enough, but it's not. Alright, so this is a Twilight Struggle influenced design. You have a bunch of big decks of cards that operate via, time-boxed periods that are handled in the game. First, you play with an 1834 deck that's going to cover a couple of turns. Turns are essentially sets of 8 actions by the players, and then you have another time period for 35 and 36, and that'll be 2 turns again. And then you have a 3-turn period for 37. So you have these 3 different decks. They're different size, and within that you have some generic cards that span all the decks. And the way they handle the timing in this game is the generic cards get pulled in along with the others. Because it's fairly large decks, there's no reshuffles, nothing like that. Indeed, you're probably not going to get, you're not going to get all the cards in play. You also have some key events that have to be played, that have to appear as available in every scenario. So there's certain elements of this particular situation, which is a patriotic, nationalistic, Francophile movement within Lower Canada in 1834 to 1837. Now, one of the things that immediately grabbed me about this and made me think about, gee, I want this game, is, yeah, that's a pretty odd topic. I'm always attracted to the kind of offbeat topics. So that was an immediate plus in terms of it. I was a little iffy about, do I want another Twilight Struggle design game? Well, the truth of the matter is, I enjoy Twilight Struggle and some of its ilk. The only places I've been burned is where the games go to distill that Twilight Struggle experience and the CDG fighting over points in a certain area, and really just fighting over points, not moving armies, not rolling any dice, stuff like that. In particular, 13 Days felt too distilled from that experience for me to get a good story from it and really enjoy it much at all. And then there's an even worse one that's older, something Cold War 1955 or something like that, which was really like as bare bones of this kind of point competition CDG that I could possibly see. I've seen others that I do like, though. 1960, the presidential race, that's sort of on the Twilight Struggle level. Maybe a little lighter, but you can pare away that much and still give me something of interest. On the other hand, you've got, very recently I covered Europe in Turmoil, also by Compass, which handles sort of the build-up to World War I. And that one is much, much richer. And by that I don't mean, necessarily a better game or whatever, although I like it better, in terms of the amount of opportunities and different choices that you have. I've also seen some that take off of the 1960 play. Numbskull Games put out a couple of political simulations for multiple players, which I really liked the idea of. The execution of them, they appeared somewhat imbalanced, unbalanced, however you want to put it. This one doesn't show any. First of all, it's 2-player, so it would, in playtesting, you would very quickly see really serious unbalances. However, it does use a lot of cards. They don't all come up. There's randomness and other factors, so it's harder you know, in whatever amount of playings that I could put into a game, and I've played Twilight Struggle maybe 3 or 4 times total, which is pretty heavy for something that is fairly recent. Yeah, in my view, that's fairly recent. Yeah, you know, basically something that I picked up in the last decade and maybe a couple of years. I consider to be so recent that I have not had the opportunity to play it very often, and I probably never will. And this game, of course, coming out last year or whatever, certainly falls into that category. It's probably not something I'm going to get a lot of plays in on, unfortunately. So I would never be able to give a judgment on, well, how tightly balanced is it? What I can tell you is that it can be very swingy. The luck has a significant effect on it. The cards that you draw, the dice that you roll, they can all impact, no matter how, you know, carefully you plan this thing, you are going to be facing a significant amount of chaos in this game that appears. Okay, let's talk a little about, I guess, stuff. First of all, the components. Compass went all out on this one. They put out a hard-mounted board. I don't know if I've seen a mounted board by them before. Lots of these little colored cubes, which I like the looks of. They operate on these tracks, which I found somewhat less effective in terms of presenting sort of the overall view of, you know, what the situation is compared to, say, a Twilight Struggle or really almost any of the other games where you have a number counter sitting on the map. Those number counters on a more geographically designed map really kind of jump out at me, and they tell me what I'm doing and what's going on. However, geography plays little role in this game. In fact, none, basically. What it does is, hey, you've got these tracks, they've got some information on them, and in particular, you couldn't just go to a number counter because of these numbers running along here, which is the additional cost to place into those spaces. So design-wise, I don't know, the number counter wouldn't be a simple replacement. There might be some means of creating stacks of pieces for each area. And the reason that I would find as an advantage is this map is rather large as well as being hard. And it strikes me that it's better to make a smaller map as long as everything's understandable and clear in it. And I think if you if you reduce these tracks to, you know, a single box or a double space box or whatever, you can make this map significantly smaller, and then it would fit on more play spaces, and overall, I think, provide more value in that sense. Of course, the cost to that, well, the tracks are very easy to assess individually. The problem, of course, is it's difficult to see what a particular province is. And since the counties within Lower Canada are not first on the mind of many people, you know, if you live there, sure, then it's not going to be very easy for most people to find the locations of these things, and perhaps a somewhat more compacted representation would be easier to assimilate and to see everything. I'm not sure about that. You have a bunch of other tracks on this map, a whole bunch of information that's covered on here. First of all, running along the side here, you have this Rebellious Spirit track, which is incredibly vital to the game. What it does is, if the Rebellious Spirit gets high enough, gets to a certain point, it's one of the game end conditions. And the higher it goes, the worse things are for the Patriot player, who is the Francophile support, in the sense that there's part of this, let's see, over here, there's a little table, fear of reprisal. The higher that things are looking like they're going to go to a violent resolution, which they did historically, the more likely that people in the rural counties are going to say, you know, let's not do this. Let's stop provoking the crown in this way. Other things that are on here, let's see if we can give a view of this, is down here you have all the different turns labeled here. Some of them have some special effects at certain turns, and you'll have to look those up now. There's pretty useful player aids that give you all of the information on here. And they're double-sided. There's 2 of them, and of course the rulebook also. I found the player aids didn't have all the information in them. They never do, right? Almost never. And so I found myself paging through the rulebook, which is less efficient for finding things, but I knew I would find the whole rule. I still managed to screw up, of course. You also have these opportunity point tracks. Now the way and you have spaces to hold opportunity cards. This is kind of a neat little design in this. So this game strays from that Twilight Struggle model in a few ways. One of those ways is the idea of opportunity cards. Essentially, like in Twilight Struggle, if you play a card of your opponent's, you can take the action points for it, but then they get the event for it. So that's something you kind of don't want to do. And there are ways to get rid of cards in the game. But sometimes they have a prerequisite on them. And then also some of the cards will be dealt down here. The ones that have a prerequisite, if you haven't met the prerequisite, end up down here as opportunities, and they give you points on your opportunity track. You spend points from your opportunity track in order to get the use to play that card that's down there. And then one other key portion. I don't know if I'll be able to do this in a clean way. It's here somewhere. I should just unfold the whole thing, right? It's under here. Here we go. We have this whole tracking here. So these are the urban counties. They work similar to the rural. There are some differences. They're more expensive to operate in, and they generate different values. But this is how victory points are generated. It's from these tables here. Now, there's a victory point track, which is down here, you can see. And that covers both players. If we go over back to this side, the other side of it is over here. And you follow it with a zigzagging, which I don't particularly like. There's also some, some holding things for some of the actions that you can take. But you basically have these 4 different types of scoring areas, and they're controlled, and this is the other big innovation, by these dice. Now, the dice are marked with, let's not take the defective one, they're marked with 3 of one letter, and then the other 3 letters. So again, there's 4 tracks, and each die is associated with one of these tracks. Okay, so when you play a card, it will tell you to roll a certain kind of die, and sometimes you have a choice. So if it's an organization die, you take this one, which has multiple O's on it, and then one of each of the others. You roll this die, and it will come up with a certain symbol, and then you pick that track. Then that track moves forward. And once that track moves forward far enough, it hits the scoring space, and you follow the scoring rules for that particular track. So rural counties are going to be gathered by however many counties that you own. So you get victory points, you get points on this track, or spaces on the track, based on ownership of the counties. So if you own a county, well, if neither person owns the county, it's at a 0. If you own the county, it moves it 1 to your direction. If the other person owns the county, it goes 1 in their direction. So if you swing a county for one person's to your own, it'll move 2 spaces. on the track. And again, these zigzag just to provide a more compact representation. Okay, the number on the track is how many victory points you're going to get from it. And you can see these can go up quite high, very high indeed. Now, each of the tracks has its own special scoring rule. So in this case, for the rural counties, first you roll on the fear of reprisal table over here. And that means that the Patriot could lose a lot of his position. Now, he tends to have a lot of cards that put him to an advantage on the rural counties. And he starts the game with an advantage in the rural counties as well. So, as the game gets further and further along and you're more and more afraid of a military situation, that table is going to have more impact on this. So first you roll on that, then you score the victory points. So anytime that you're looking at this, you're not sure how bad, what the exact point score is going to be by generating a roll on that. What happens when the fear of reprisal happens is that the loyal player gets to remove cubes from the Patriot player and just drive them away and thereby change the valuation on this table. The organizations is based, this is one of the more complicated ones. There's little counters here for orgs. Basically, you can have an org in each of the rural counties and also in the urban counties, except the Patriot sort of can't have an org in Quebec. There's a card that gives him one, and then that just doesn't really have much effect on play beyond giving him victory points on the org table. For each urban county org that you have, you move 2 spaces on here. For each rural county, you move 1. Now, those orgs can be used for other things. They'll help some of your cards, and they're generally good things to have. I'm not going to explain how you get them right away. But anyway, on this table, you just get the victory points and then it resets the track. On the external influence table, it's similar to the orgs, except external influence just comes from the cards. There's nothing you can do on the board. There's nothing you can really do to just generate these at will. These guys you can fight over as you fight over areas in Twilight Struggle or 13 Days or whatever. Yeah. Then there's the urban counties, which have their own special rules. Now, there aren't a lot of spaces for the urban counties. There's only 2 urban counties. If you own one of them, you get to move 1 space here. If your opponent owns it, he moves it to the left. And again, it's got that swing. So if you steal 1 from your opponent, you move it 2 spaces. The most you can hold is 2 of them, but they're worth a decent amount of points each. When you score the urban counties, the first thing you do is you just get the victory points and you reset the thing. But then you suffer an attrition on these. So every time they score, you're going to lose some of these. And that's for both players. And then if somebody's completely been wiped out in one of the urban counties after that attrition, you get some more victory points. So that's kind of how victory points are generally created. There are cards that will give you victory points as well. So that's really a neat little system because it drives the scoring. There are no scoring cards in the game. You don't even know how many times something's going to score. In Twilight Struggle, you can pretty much predict and you know kind of the pattern that they're going to have. Here, it's reliant on these dice. Oh, okay. Excuse me. What else do we have? We have the game box, which feels kind of sturdy. It feels like Compass had less sturdy boxes, and now they're not quite up to the GMT iron-plated armored boxes. Which, God, I don't know how if you can damage them, but they are getting a little bit more heft to them, which I like. I took damage to one of my boxes recently. I've had a ridiculous number of customer support issues with Compass recently. Until this game, none of them were really their fault. I had a couple of things that involved the mail, I believe, and one where a box got damaged, one where something didn't show up at all. But with this one, and they resolved the other 2 with, just beautifully. With this one, the EI die is misprinted. I don't know if they're going to be able to make this one good. If they printed, if like a major batch of their dice is the wrong die, that's just going to be screwed. But if this is a rarity, maybe they'll be able to give me one that's right. It's not like I can't correct it. I can just make it an O on here or something or whatever. But, you know, having something that's a little wrong bothers me. Especially now, you know, it didn't used to be that big a deal when I was young and games were like $5 for a box game or whatever. But now they're getting up there in price, printing costs and everything. So I'm figuring, well, you know, if this is not like the majority of their dice are screwed up, maybe they can get me one. If it is, yeah, I'll live. Good dice overall. These, you know, these nice big ones. I'm not a big fan of the big dice, but I'll pack these with the game because we got different colors. Some more things that you have with it. You have these little cards. No room on the board for this. What this does is this indicates some special actions that you can buy with your cards. So if you have action points, you can spend them to trigger one of these. And you get one of these per turn. And basically you have 7 turns and you have 6 of these cards, assuming the game goes the full length, or 6 of these tokens. And each of them gives you a little advantage, well, sometimes kind of big advantages, and it's up to you to kind of marshal those and decide how and when to spend them. And you might not want to spend them all. Your cards might be more useful to you otherwise, etc. So, and then there's, of course, the rulebook, which I found I had more trouble with than I should. It's, of course, a glossy rulebook, which never helps me, and it's got lots of pictures and everything inside of it. And a fair amount in the back. There's designer notes, some strategy. Nothing too... So, like, the representation of the game isn't well discussed here. This is, I've mentioned this before, this is more of a, gee, this is how I came to design this game. It was intended to be something else. Well, that's interesting, but that's not exactly what I want from designer's notes. That's like, I don't know. It's interesting, I read it, but I would be more interested in understanding the choice of why this kind of CDG for that. That's partially in here. And then, you know, some of the ideas about why, for example, the choice was made to not go with the fixed scoring, but to go with the dice. I think it's a very clever choice, and it gives you, so even if you're not interested in the period, it gives you a very different playing game than most of these Twilight Struggle outgrowths. And I have to say, the other one that Compass did, Europe in Turmoil, feels very different too, because of the chaos and because of the amount of different things going on. There's quite a bit going on in here. There aren't all that many actions, though. That's what's kind of interesting. The quite a bit that's going on comes kind of organically from these dice, from these different types of things that you can score with. It's not just, oh, I'm interested in Southeast Asia for this period of the game, you know, and then both players are piling into there. It's nothing like that. Instead, what you're worried about really is trying to match the particular victory point chart that's going, you know, that you think you can engage in, and it's played by your cards and by the position on the scoring track that you have, and then you have opportunities. So, for example, the loyalists have the ability to reset a scoring track. That can be a major thing. That's kind of like denying someone a scoring card, just wiping it out, you know, in a Twilight Struggle type situation. But it all works okay here in a different sort of fashion because what you're really doing is just manipulating a bunch of different tables that are all working together. And that works for me. So in general, when you play your action points in this game, you're going to usually be playing them in the rural counties, and it basically costs you 1 to increase the level of something by 1. There are some modifiers in there. So, for example, this says you have to pay an extra 1. But if you're catching up to where somebody else is, you pay 1 less. And so that can cancel out the extra 1. You'll always have to pay a minimum of 1. You can't get away with zeros. When you play your cards, you have that common challenge of, do you want the action points to play on the board or do something else with it? We'll get to something else in a little bit. Or do you want to play the event for its special effects? The events tend to be a little bit more, they tend to give you more points total. So like you'll not usually be given an action point card, an amount of action points that would allow you to duplicate the event. That would be really disturbing if that was the case, like if you just had a more flexible thing. And the game seems to do a pretty good job of giving you a real choice in each case. And the event and the action points seem to be in good alignment and tightly chosen. But then the other things that you can, and in the urban counties, the action points are doubled for putting the cubes down. Well, not doubled. They cost a base of 2 because there's still these plus modifiers on them, and they don't get doubled. Okay. So other things that you can do is creating organizations which allow you, you do something called a mobilization check, where you basically roll 3 dice and you're trying to get under essentially the amount of support that you have in the region. Well, equal to or under. The amount of support you have in the region. But there are some modifiers. First of all, the number of action points you choose to spend on that is added to the number of cubes that you have there, the amount of support that you have there. Secondly, there might be other things. So for example, you might be able to bring the urban organization in to help the rural organization when you do this. And you have to spend a minimum of 2, but that gives you an automatic plus 2. And then you have to roll equal to or under that value. And I roll dice for no apparent reason. I probably succeeded there. I got a 10. Usually you'll be going with a target. You'll be trying to get your target up somewhere between 9 and 11. Anywhere higher than that, I mean, it could just happen, I guess, but for the most part, you're not aiming to do that. Because because it's 3 dice, so there's, you know, a nice big bell curve, and you could end up way on the tail on that. But if you do end up failing, you can spend ops points to catch yourself up. Now, ops points are a little bit more valuable than the action points that you get. They're generally flexible enough that you can often turn them into action points. So that's one that both players can do, and that's in order to put an organization, which is kind of a permanent thing in a particular county. And what the organizations do for you, well, that's interesting. I can't think of anything they generically do for you as the Patriot player, although they impact your ability to play certain cards. But for the Loyalist, they allow you to get these volunteer corps once the situation becomes violent enough. I got them in here somewhere. Yeah, so there's these volunteer corps. You have a set of 5 of these. They're basically a victory point that you can score at the end of the game if things go violent. Things don't have to go violent. There's 3 ways the game can end, which I'll get to in a moment. Just like, you know, Twilight Struggle can end multiple ways. Well, there's multiple ways this one can end. And a likely and the historical way is for there to be either an insurrection or a crackdown before the insurrection where military force is used. Now, the game was originally, you know, toyed with like trying to represent the military operation, but honestly, the military operation was a foregone conclusion once you get through the political machinations before that, which is why the game ended up being a political game instead of a military. One of the things that you can do as the Patriot player is you can spend action points to do a call for composure and reduce the rebellious spirit. And the later in the game, the more expensive that gets. And the reason you want to do this is, in general, as the Patriot player, you don't want the rebellious spirit going up. The reason is your rural counties are going to be cracked down on much harder as the rebellious spirit goes higher. Now, also it gives opportunities. The Loyalist player is able to recruit his volunteer corps where he has organizations, and each organization can only recruit 1 to a maximum of 5. But this is basically just a fixed point to prevent the rebellious spirit from increasing. It will increase every turn if you don't spend to prevent that from happening. But it's not necessarily the case that the Patriot wants it to stop increasing. In fact, in the game that I had, they wanted to boost it up because they were ahead. So they actually shoved it way up to the end. And then my loyalist screwed up and ended up sending it over the edge accidentally. Okay, because I didn't read carefully. I have reading issues, don't I? I hear a bird knocking on my window. Okay, another one is the volunteer corps recruitment, which has to be done in an organization, and you make one of those mobilization checks. The modifiers are a little different on it, but again, you have to spend at least 2, and that 2 gets added to your mobilization value. And then the last special thing you have is the ability to buy these guys. If you don't want to play a card, you can buy an ops card, and you spend, if I can find it, you spend your ops points to, and you move them down if you have enough points, to cover the AP cost of that card, and then you trigger the event on that card. And you get a fixed number of ops points each turn, and you get additional ones if an event that, if your opponent plays a card that is of your color, but it doesn't have the prerequisites to trigger that card. Then you get half the value of that card in ops points, and the card gets put down here. And you know, you may not want to pick that particular card, but so those ops points can be used for something else, or at some later point that card may be available. Now, at the end of each year, all the opportunities go away. Some of them go away at the end of each turn, and your hands go away, and you get new hands. But otherwise, if you're sitting there with a handful of cards that you don't really want to play, and you delay that by playing, and this is one of the things that's really clever about this, you can delay playing the cards from your hand by playing them out of the ops pool. Trying to think if there's any other way to do it. Well, there's a really tricky thing to do, which is, let me think. I seem to remember that there was a way to trigger stuff. I had some kind of weird mechanism going on where you were able to put stuff into the ops pool, essentially. But I may have been mistaken about that. I'm trying to remember it. Oh, yeah, like there's the ability to force someone to trade your cards, etc. There's this, which allows you to exchange cards from your hand into the ops pool. So you can, like, basically you can do some fiddling around to do a delay of game. And there's a number of cards that just essentially are not null ops, but do you as much harm as your opponent. Why would you want to play that? Well, because you got nothing better to play. Your cards in hand may be worse. So you may be fiddling around trying to prevent the play from proceeding as quickly as it can. I found that these different options might be difficult to grasp initially. Like, I certainly found myself a little confused as to what to do. I found myself confused as to what to do with Twilight Struggle too when I first played it. I feel more comfortable now with how to take advantage of this system. But certainly, you know, I played basically once incorrectly and then once more correctly. We're not going to say correctly as a whole. So it gives you, you know, a different framework to play something in a very similar type of game as Twilight Struggle. One that's less competitive in nature. And by competitive here, I really mean what the competitive player seems to want in a CDG is something where they can largely predict how the game's going to flow, what their actions are going to do, and, you know, what the consequences of their actions are. So games like Twilight Struggle with a single, not very, well, essentially a single, not very big deck, means that you have a pretty good ability to predict what's going to come out and what's not. On the other end of the scale, is something like Amateurs in Arms, which I think was Compass as well. Well, I don't remember. Beautiful, beautiful game. That might have been Clash of Arms. Yeah, that's Clash of Arms. Absolutely beautiful game on the War of 1812. And it's got like this humongous deck of cards. The bigger you make the deck, the more randomized the game's going to be, as long as the deck is not pretty homogeneous. As long as it's got a lot of interesting events and stuff going on. So you can't really guarantee that you're gonna get those key cards coming out. Now this one takes an interesting shortcut with the key cards. It makes sure some of them show up by making them key events that get put into that opportunity deck. So it's less chaotic than some of the games, less chaotic certainly than Europe in Turmoil as well. But it's not the kind of game that the really serious person who wants to study a game and know that this strategy is going to resolve into this situation no matter what, or else they haven't seen something, but they've been studying it carefully. So games like Twilight Struggle and Paths of Glory work with very much a type of pattern where the type of player who is going to be most pleased with it is probably someone who really does study the game and wants to become a master of it and wants to just really fully understand what these choices are going to come down to. And this game doesn't fit into that category as much. In which case, does balance matter as much? Yeah, good question, On the other hand, this doesn't give the kind of rich experience that Europe in Turmoil does. So it sits somewhere in between the Twilight Struggle, Europe in Turmoil model in terms of saying, it's a little easier to handle. The rules aren't very complicated. There aren't all that many special cases, although the ones that there are can be kind of tricky because they're new concepts. So they may take some getting used to. But I don't think you need to worry about people becoming sharks in this game in quite the way that you do, to take Herr Doctor's term for it, in something like Paths of Glory, where there are people who just, if you have not studied the game to the degree they have, they will wipe the floor with your ass every single time. I don't think that you can say that with this. There's enough randomness in this that certainly somebody who's played it more is going to have a better feel for it and be able to do better. Anyway, I found it a refreshing take on the, wow, it's suitable for solitaire. Oh no, they give it a medium of 4 out of 10. Yeah, I'll buy that. I thought it was given a 1 because their little symbol for that is a 1, and I'm like, I wouldn't say that. There's much worse. Yeah, 4 sounds about right. But yeah, this is a game that has enough variance and randomness that I think you can enjoy seeing new things unfold. It's still a stripped down, put cubes in a certain place, just get the points up, and it's kind of, again, not one of those situations that people are super familiar with, I would assume, unless you're a historian of Canadian, early Canadian history, in which case, well, then maybe this will feel a little more natural to you. And that kind of not being really aligned with understanding the situation as well makes it more difficult, for me at least, to approach a game. Just because, certainly in terms of trying to view, hey, what's the game trying to do, really? What's it trying to represent? I get a pretty good feel of what it's trying to represent, though, without having to understand that history. Just like you kind of get a pretty good feel from Twilight Struggle and from most games of this type. The core mechanism is intuitive enough that you've got kind of a, yeah, that makes sense. Makes sense. And there were no glaring, oh my God, this is so crazy aspects in this game, which always kind of pleases me. When I hit one of those, well, those things are kind of weird because they make me gnaw at them for a while and try to figure out, is the designer, you know, far more clever than I am and figured something out that, you know, is just beyond my capability to make that kind of linkage. And usually I find I come to the answer of, no, they weren't. They were taking a shortcut or making an abstraction that I just didn't, you know, I don't think links well with things. I didn't see anything like that with this. This felt, you know, this felt pretty veritable. That's not quite the right word. We'll leave it there. All right. Glad I was able to get through this without fainting. I had to haul my groceries, and today ended up, I was not as strong as I've been the last couple days. All right, let's send this up.